Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and today is a big one. If everything goes to plan, we will actually try and move Harry under his own power for the very first time in the entire time I've owned it. Oh. All right, the first thing I'm going to try today is to actually see if my alternator is working. So it's time to start the car again, and fingers crossed it actually runs like it's supposed to, and we can have a look at that alternator and see if it's actually charging. It runs, it still runs. Let's check that alternator. Yep, we have 14.2 volts. We have a working alternator, yes! All right, so the next thing I need to tackle, as you know on this channel, I am a huge fan of doing things twice. Not really, but I do. And I am really not happy with how the clutch is acting at the moment. I think some of it might be to do with my cable, but I think a lot of it is to do with the fact that the clutch is old and it was pretty much junk when I put it in there. So I bit the bullet and bought a new clutch. So before I even get to drive on this clutch, I'm going to replace the clutch. So let's get the car up in the air. Let's see if we can get the gearbox out and change the clutch over without too much headache. I think it shouldn't take me too long. Fingers crossed. Let's change the clutch. I really like doing things the hard way, don't I? I've taken the drive shafts off, the gearbox is completely disconnected, and I'm trying to get it off, and doing a little bit more research, you can't get the gearbox off without taking the whole engine out. So it's actually not that much more work now, to be honest, to get the engine out. It's really just the electrical connections and the fuel lines, really, and then I can unbolt it and drop it down. But because the gearbox is disconnected, I'm going to connect the gearbox up again, drop the whole thing down, and then I can hopefully take the engine out, take the gearbox off, change the clutch, put it all back together again, put it back in the car. So simple. Why do I do things twice? Why? All right, well, I have now the engine disconnected, and thankfully, because of the way I set it up, it's actually quite easy to disconnect. So I disconnected the breather from the center. With the fuel rails, I decided to take the entire rails off, leaving the injectors in so I don't get fuel everywhere. That keeps it nice and buttoned up. And I just disconnected my power over in that back corner there. You just undid my two bulkhead connectors, my one clip here, and the engine is disconnected from the car. So now everything underneath is already disconnected, so it's time to put my lift table underneath and get this engine out. All right, that was a bit messy than I was hoping. I forgot I had to disconnect the bottom oil return line to the oil pump on the engine, and yeah, there's lots of oil everywhere, and I had to get the engine out, I had to get it down, get some space so I can change the clutch. I probably could have changed it actually with the engine where it was, and it was connected up, but it's going to be easier to see like this. Get into it, do it properly, and then put it back together again. All right, I have my nice new clean pressure plate. I am putting in another factory clutch. The factory clutch is more than enough for the power of this engine. It's the same clutch that you use all the way through to 3.2s. So this little 2.8, even though I've done a bit to it, is not really a super powerful engine. So I'm going to connect this up now, and got to make sure when you're putting in the new thrust bearing that you get all the shims and stuff in the correct order. So I'm going to put them on now, put the thrust bearing in, and then put the clutch back on the car, and let's get it back in. All right, gearbox is back on, engine is ready to get back into the car. One thing you need to make sure of when you are putting the 915 gearbox on is that the clutch fork goes into the throwout bearing here. So there's a groove in the bearing and the clutch fork has to clip in like that. So it's a little bit of maneuvering to make sure it's all right. It's all in, it's ready to go. So let's get this thing back in the car. Alright, so engine's back in, clutch is in, we're back to where we started. Now it's time to finish off doing an oil change, one of many oil changes. So I'll just drain the oil from the oil tank first, then out of the sump, and then we'll top it up, and then we should be able to go back to starting again. Hopefully we have a working clutch and stuff. I'm not holding my breath that this is going to fix the clutch, but at least I have peace of mind knowing that I have a new clutch in there, which is going to be part way towards fixing up my issues. All right, I took a quick trip down to Super Cheap and got myself a new filter, a filter removal tool, and some oil. Make sure you put in a nice high zinc oil. I don't want to get in oil debates, but this one is, this Penrite stuff is good stuff. I'm going to top it up now, and then hopefully we can start it again and see how it's going. All right, well, engine is back in, and some of you may have already spotted it, but I'll give you a listen. Can you hear this? There's a fuel pump. That is a starter motor that is just spinning freely to itself. And for a split second I thought, is the solenoid stuck? No, but those eagle-eyed of you who've probably ran into this issue before, when changing a clutch on a 911, the ring gear that the starter motor engages to is not mounted to the flywheel like almost every other car you've ever seen. It's mounted to the clutch, and guess what I didn't change over? The ring gear. So I have to pull the engine out again and pull the clutch off again to swap the ring gear over. What a moron. So you can see here what I'm talking about. Here's the ring gear around the edge of the old clutch, or the old pressure plate I should say, and to get it off, sounds like it's a little bit of a hassle. I need to actually heat it up and knock it off. So it's actually a press fit. I may as well get this one off and then start pulling the engine out again. Yay! Well, that was a lot easier than I was expecting. It really didn't take a lot of heat, and this thing is not this is not an oxyacetylene. This is just a LPG / I think America you call it propane torch. So that came off pretty easy. Now for the fun bit of pulling that engine out again. Oh, I just finished putting it back in. right, with a bit of messing around and a couple of hang-ups, that was about 40 minutes to get the engine out again, so I'm getting pretty quick at this thing. I'm not going to disconnect the oil lines this time. I'm going to do it. I've got enough travel in the oil lines there to leave it like it is, so I'm not going to change the oil again. I should be able to get the box off there. It's going to be a little bit more awkward because it's, you know, I'm sort of half under the car, but I'll get the box off. Let's change that, let's put that ring gear on and get the whole thing back in again. Oh. That's a lot more work wrestling that gearbox off from underneath when you don't have as much room, as opposed to having the engine out, sitting there nice and happy, and yeah. Anyway, the gearbox is off, the clutch is out, and now I need to heat up my ring gear and hopefully get it to slip over the top of this. That slips over pretty easily, actually. I was going to have to heat it up, but I don't think I'm going to need to. It just, it slips over quite nicely, so let's slip on the ring gear, and then let's get this back in the car. All right, that was about an hour, but it's back in again, and hopefully ready to start it up. Fingers crossed I haven't missed anything. I've gone over and double checked it, but we won't know until I turn the key, so I really hope it works this time. Good. Yeah, all right, well, it runs. Adam from Link ECU in New Zealand was on the computer again and just fine-tuning some bits and pieces, but it's pretty much running the way it needs to now. So the last thing I need to do is actually see if it drives. I did put it in and out of gear when it was on the hoist, and the clutch is working. The clutch is still really heavy, and there's something I need to do more of that, but I think it's actually time to see if I can actually drive it. Oh! Oh! It moves under its own power, but I think I need to bolt the steering wheel on. It just came off in my hands. Let's not do that. It moves. It doesn't move nicely, but it moves. I think I'm going to have to do something about that clutch. The clutch is still really heavy and really difficult to get that friction point right. I've got a feeling what it might be is maybe if I actually shorten the arm on the bottom that actually connects to the clutch, so it'll give me less clutch travel, but it'll give me greater leverage. So I hope that makes sense. Definitely not safe enough to drive yet. Can't find the nut for the steering wheel, so the steering wheel is just sitting on there at the moment. I just moved it backwards and forwards on the driveway enough to sort of get an idea. It moves under its own power, which is the first time it's ever moved under its own power in 5 years, or like probably in about 15 years, because apparently the previous owner, it was sitting dead for 10 years when they had it. So, that's a big milestone, but it's still a little way off yet. As I said, I'm not happy with that clutch. Anyway, if you guys are enjoying my crazy antics and this whole process, please come and like and subscribe and all that sort of good stuff. Join us on Patreon and watch these videos the day before everybody else. And if you are going to be shopping for any parts for your Porsches, make sure you check out PorschePartsByJeff.com first and compare prices there. All right, guys, see you next time.